Finally, there has been some movement in Europe regarding the issue of frozen Russian assets. Today, the European Commission announced that it is developing a scheme to transfer nearly 200 billion euros from frozen Russian assets to help rebuild Ukraine after the war. This is the first sign that they have finally started working in this direction. The first ministerial meeting on this topic is set for Saturday, August 30. But as always, in Europe they're trying to find a clever way to actually seize this Russian money and how to transfer it to Ukraine. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is August 29. Let's analyze this topic together. There are some interesting details here. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment below, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, as European diplomats reported today, the European Commission is preparing a plan to transfer 200 billion euros of frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. Brussels is checking whether national capitals are ready to transfer assets into riskier investments that could bring more profit to Ukraine and increase pressure on Russia, since it refuses to stop the fighting. Supporters of this idea in Europe also see this plan as a step toward possibly confiscating the assets and transferring them to Ukraine as punishment for Russia's refusal to pay post-war compensation. Officially, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has made the strongest statement on this issue so far. Quote, "We continue to work on the frozen Russian assets in order to use them and contribute to defense. It is important to note right away that this option does not provide for the immediate confiscation of Russian assets, which most European Union countries oppose due to financial and legal issues. The Europeans are looking for some clever schemes, and finally, they found one. The negotiations will reach their climax on Saturday, when the 27 foreign ministers of the European Union will discuss this option for the first time during an informal meeting in Copenhagen, Denmark. According to a memo prepared before this meeting, during the discussion, the ministers should consider further options for using the income generated from immobilized Russian sovereign assets. Considering that in 2026 Ukraine will face a budget deficit of 8 billion euros, European Union countries are looking for new ideas to continue financing Ukraine amid tight domestic budgets and the lack of opportunities to issue pan-European debt obligations. Despite all its economic difficulties, Europe is facing growing pressure that is forcing it to step up its efforts. With the United States stepping back from the issue of aid to Ukraine and Donald Trump's unsuccessful attempts to reach a peace agreement. As Kerliveski, Estonia's Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal and Consular Affairs, stated today, we are hearing that it has become more difficult to attract funds from state finances or the European Union budget, but we have those Russian assets there, and a logical question arises, how can we and why can't we use them? And so the Baltic countries, which are close to Russia, along with several other European countries, have long been demanding that the European Union fully confiscate all Russian assets. Within the European Commission, this idea is being promoted by Latvia's Economy Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis and Estonia's Foreign Minister Kaja Kallas. However, this option continues to face resistance from Western European countries, including Germany, Italy, and Belgium. But Belgium is particularly vulnerable to legal and financial risks here, since Euroclear is located on Belgian territory. This is the financial organization where the majority of the frozen Russian assets are held. Well, as a compromise. Let me remind you, in 2024 the G7 countries agreed to allocate a total of 45 billion euros in profits earned from investing Russian assets to Ukraine. At the same time, the underlying assets remain untouched. But just imagine that they managed to earn 45 billion euros in interest and transfer it to Ukraine. Nevertheless, the European Union's share of 18 billion euros in the loan will be fully paid off by the end of this year. What caused the calls for generating additional income in a short period of time? So, basically, okay, this part was used, Ukraine still needs help moving forward. And the question arises, how exactly can these frozen Russian assets be used further so that Ukraine can get more money from them? And as a workaround, the lawyers of the European Commission are considering the possibility of transferring the assets to a special purpose holding, supported by a number of European Union countries and possibly foreign states outside the European Union. Most likely that's Canada and the United Kingdom. I'll explain why later. And so the officials compared the proposed new fund to the European Stability Mechanism. It's a monetary fund for rescuing countries, which is supported only by Eurozone members, and it was created outside the framework of European Union treaties. So it's a separate fund that seems to be internal, within the jurisdiction of the European Union, but is taken a bit outside its framework. Again, I'll explain why a bit later. And so, according to a European Union official, the potential fund for Ukraine will also be open to G7 countries, including the United Kingdom and Canada, which support the confiscation of Russian assets, although the details are still being worked out. Overall, this new structure will give the European Union more control over the transfer of Russian assets to Ukraine when the time comes. Why is that? According to current rules in the European Union, any country can actually return these frozen assets to Moscow by vetoing the extension of sanctions, which is voted on every 6 months. The most likely candidate to take this path is the pro-Russian and pro-Trump government of Hungary. That is, hypothetically, Viktor Orban could exercise his right at the next sanctions vote. And a situation arises in which Europe would seemingly have to return these frozen assets to the Russians, transferring the funds to a new body, a new fund that potentially doesn't require a unanimous decision, would allow them to prevent the threat from Hungary. So in fact, Orban won't be making any decisions at all from that point on. This is a separate fund where all these frozen Russian assets are transferred, and it's not for nothing. Transferring the frozen Russian assets to a new fund will allow them to be placed in riskier investments that can bring Ukraine higher returns. And this would be a change compared to the current set of rules, which requires Euroclear to invest the frozen Russian assets in the Belgian central bank, which offers the lowest available risk-free rate of return. That means the risks are practically zero, but the returns there are also very, very minimal. So they want to partially move Russian money out of the jurisdiction of the European Union, invest it in risky investments, but with a higher profit percentage, and give that percentage to Ukraine. However, skeptics, including the chief executive officer of Euroclear, Valery Orban, fear that European Union taxpayers will have to bear the main burden of any losses caused by riskier operations. To separate jurisdiction, a set financial timeframe is used. Belgium wants other European Union countries to take responsibility for the assets under the plan proposed by the European Commission. And so, according to an European Union official and a high-ranking foreign diplomat, the Belgian government recently responded warmly to the European Commission's plan. Meanwhile, countries that are farther from Russia, such as Spain, also support this idea. So basically they say, okay, we'll share the burden of responsibility, let's take the risk. After all, we're not risking our own money. This is the money of unwashed Russians. We can take it, invest it somewhere in very risky ventures, make a profit, give the interest to Ukraine, and then we'll see what to do next. There may come a time when Ukraine takes all this money, or it simply gets lost. Well, if it's lost, at least it will have brought a good return. This is the type of plan now being discussed in the European Commission. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye all.